Thank you, Ira, and good evening, everybody. And thank you, Ira, for hiring me when I was a 21-year-old college student trying to figure out what to do with my life and bringing me in to learn about organizing. From you and Jay and Paul, and I particularly remember tonight, of course, Ed Kelly, who was one of the best teachers and the best friends I ever had. When Ronald Reagan became president in 1980, one of his first acts was to rescind a toxic chemical right-to-know standard for workplaces, which Jimmy Carter's administration had proposed. At the same time, the Cincinnati Post was running a series of articles, which you can see over there, showing that Cincinnati was the per capita cancer capital of the United States. And City Council decided to hold hearings to investigate. Dr. Eula Bingham, who had been the head of OSHA under Carter, had just returned to her native Cincinnati. In her testimony at the hearings, she asked this question: if the federal government is not going to protect us, why don't we do it ourselves? We can enact the right-to-know law in Cincinnati so that workers, community residents, and firefighters will be able to find out what toxic chemicals they are being exposed to and take action. It seems shocking now, in 2025, to think that this information was not available. But that was the situation in 1980, and Ohio Citizen Action's work over 3 decades to win the right to know and then to use it to make concrete improvement in people's lives is one of the organization's strongest legacies. The campaign to pass the Cincinnati Right to Know law, run by several people who are here tonight, you can hear it, Brewster, was a royal battle, with Procter & Gamble leading the charges. But they made a crucial tactical error. Rather than trying to water down the proposal, sponsored by Councilmember Tom Rush, they opposed it outright, thereby ultimately locking themselves out of the negotiations. What emerged after a 2-year campaign by Citizen Action, labor unions, communities, firefighters, and technical experts from NIOSH was a very strong right-to-know law. The Cincinnati ordinance became the model for laws we were then able to pass in other cities, including Akron, led by the incomparable Rich Swirsky. Columbus, Kent, Lancaster, Norwood, Oregon, and Toledo. In every case, the canvassers took the message door to door and organized turnout and pressure on city council members who would be waffling when local businesses tried new tactics to water the bills down. In December 1984, there was a horrific toxic chemical accident in Bhopal, India, where a methyl isocyanate released from Union Carbide killed and maimed tens of thousands of people. What the U.S. Congress wanted to know is whether that could happen here. And of course, no one could answer the question because there were no national right-to-know laws. Ohio Citizen Action joined a campaign to pass federal legislation, which was directly based on Ohio's laws, especially in the way they gave information to firefighters and local officials. We could spend the whole evening telling stories about that national campaign, which involved collecting over 1 million signatures in favor of federal law and organizing 4 trucks to start at different corners of the country, stop all along the way, loaded up with petitions and toxic waste samples, which we then drove to Washington, D.C. to deliver to members of Congress. A super drive for super fun. The auto industry tried to gut the bill by excluding reporting of chemical emissions that could cause cancer and other illnesses after long-term exposure. But in the end, we won by 1 vote. We lost the subsequent battle in Ohio to pass the Toxic Chemical Consumer Labeling Law ballot initiative in 1992, based on California's Proposition 65. We learned our lesson the hard way when the financial and political weight of the chemical and manufacturing industry from across the country combined to crush the proposal on the ballot. In fact, that campaign later was featured in a documentary by the wonderful Bill Moyers called Trade Secrets. Fortunately, the California law survives to this day and has helped to make products safer across the country. The passage of the federal law providing information on chemical emissions, known as to its inventory, laid the basis for the next chapter in Ohio Citizen Action's work in the 1990s and 2000s, the Good Neighbor campaigns. These campaigns, which numbered in the dozens across the state, were based on the premise that the best way to prevent pollution was for the residents and workers who were suffering the effects of pollution to negotiate directly with the local facilities causing it. The campaigns were driven by extraordinary community leaders and achieved concrete results, in many cases far beyond what the laws would have required. Paul Reiner, our organizing director, whose brilliant strategic leadership helped shape this organization for more than 30 years, even wrote a book teaching others how to do it. It's right over there on the table. Occasionally, these campaigns became goodbye neighbor campaigns when facilities were so bad and so dangerous that we were pushing for them to shut down. One such facility, called GEM, was a misnamed chemical recycling plant in Cleveland, which was actually pouring toxic chemicals into the air and was literally held together by duct tape. They were forced to shut down in 2008 after an explosion. I mention this in particular to provide just one example of another important legacy of Ohio Citizen Action. All of the people who got their start here and have gone on to do amazing work. A high school student who volunteered to work with us in the GEM campaign, Sandy Munson, later became a canvasser and then went on to get a PhD. She is now a professor at Gonzaga University in Washington State, where she uses our Good Neighbor campaign handbook as a textbook for her class about environmental health. We'll never be able to count the thousands of people who got their start at Ohio Citizen Action as canvassers under the leadership of Donna Walcott and Kurt Multeen. But we know for a fact that the skills that our staff learned in distilling complex issues into clear and compelling messages, in fundraising, and in building relationships have stood them in good stead for whatever path they have chosen in life. Some of them went on to become long-term leaders in this organization. To name a few, Melissa English, Chief Development Officer. Digital Communications Director. And of course, CEO Rachel Bells. I have to say that Rachel was the only person I ever hired for Ohio Citizen Action without actually meeting her in person when she moved from Colorado to Cincinnati. And in retrospect, that was 1996, and in retrospect, I think it was a pretty good decision.